Capita started in 2018 as a creative space to explore how the great cultural and social transformations of our day affect young children and to foster new ideas to ensure a future in which children and their families flourish. We live in a time of accelerated and compound transformation, from a prevailing sense that the economy does not work for all, fears of an uninhabitable earth, and the rapid expansion of digital technology into everyday life. Our institutions are struggling to maintain relevance, families are stressed, and fragmentation is accelerating. All of these transformations may imperil our children's futures and present new opportunities to design a future in which all children flourish. Building on Foundations for Flourishing Futures, a look ahead for young children and families, the first ever 10-year forecast focused on young children and families that we published last year with KnowledgeWorks, and with new motivation provoked by the crisis of care accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Capita is currently exploring 3 interlocking questions as we examine the future of caregiving. First, how might stakeholders re-examine the role of caregiving in society, setting up systems, structures, and narratives that reflect the true value of caregiving? Secondly, how might stakeholders involve a wide range of people, particularly those who have historically been marginalized, in tackling major caregiving challenges? And thirdly, how might stakeholders embrace intergenerational relationships and consider a range of care needs when developing future caregiving solutions? We are delighted to explore these questions and others today with our partners at Homegrown, in the paper that we've just published written by Karen and Natalie from Homegrown, and with our panelists today. So thank you again for joining us. Look forward to this rich and robust conversation. And I'll now turn it over to my colleague from Homegrown, Natalie Renew. Natalie?
Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you so much for publishing the paper and for creating the space for this conversation today. We really appreciate the partnership and this opportunity. As Joe mentioned, my name is Natalie Renew, and I'm the director of Homegrown. And Homegrown is a funders collaborative focused on improving quality and increasing access to home-based childcare. We are working across the country to identify barriers and issues facing all forms of home-based childcare, including licensed family childcare and family friend and neighbor care. And through the duration of the pandemic, have really been working both with local stakeholders and organizations to marshal relief funds for home-based providers, but have really also been grappling with how we connect the work of relief and address some of the larger systemic challenges in the policy landscape to meet the needs of home-based providers and the families and children that they serve. I'm really so excited for this conversation today and to be joined by incredibly inspiring women for this discussion. Before we do that, Karen and I are just going to share some of sort of the high points from the essay. We encourage you to read it and to share your feedback with us. But to get our conversation started today, we're just going to share some of the kind of key takeaways from the essay to get us going. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and partner in crime, Karen Tylick with Homegrown.
Thanks, Natalie. And Joe, if we could have the next slide. So this is our agenda for today. As Natalie said, we're going to touch on a few of the highlights from the essay, and then we really want to devote most of the time today to our provider panel and time for question and answer. So if we could have the next slide. So most people on the call today are probably very familiar with the challenges of the childcare landscape. Briefly, for far too many families, childcare is not accessible. Many families cannot locate care that is close to home. This is especially difficult for babies, toddlers, children with special needs, and particularly true for families of color. This was true before the pandemic, and we all know that the pandemic continues to reduce the supply of childcare and exacerbate childcare deserts and inequality. Childcare is not affordable. So unlike public K-12 education, which is largely taxpayer funded, childcare is mostly funded by private families. So families at nearly all income levels are paying large portions of their income for childcare. Survey data from 2019 showed that among working families with children under age 5 that were paying for childcare, families spent nearly 10% of their income on childcare, which is 40% higher than what the US Department of Health and Human Services defines as affordable. And even when we look at the public funding childcare subsidy, only 1 out of 5 families who qualify for subsidy are actually able to access it. Childcare is not flexible. So over 60% of families that need some non-traditional hours of care, but most childcare is only available during traditional working hours. So these are some of our current challenges in the landscape. So on the next slide, we'd like to talk about how we got here. So of course, there are many complex factors that led us to this current state, and we are just going to dip our toes into them today. I want to note that our paper on Capita does have links to additional reading and resources for a deeper dive. But at a high level, one of our main challenges is that childcare and early learning are not seen or funded as a public good. So our society has committed to publicly funding education for most children kindergarten through 12th grade, and most Americans support public funding for schools. We don't expect families to be able to privately fund their children's K-12 schooling, but we don't have a public commitment to ensure that all young children have access to care. And this is despite the clear science on the importance of the early years for children's brain development, which has lasting impacts. So during these critical years, we leave it to individual families to privately fund care and early childhood education. So why don't we have a public commitment to ensure that all young children have access to high quality, accessible, and appropriate care? In part, it's because our society still believes that it's the responsibility of mothers to remain home with their children. There is a great piece on institutionalized sexism by Julie Cashin and Rakin Mahbood that examines how our society does not value care work as an important job. And then that, coupled with the lack of investment in childcare, prevents women from achieving economic power. During the pandemic, we're certainly seeing that working mothers are much more likely than fathers to reduce their work hours and much more likely to leave the workforce altogether to care for their children. We also need to continue to examine and discuss how structural racism impacts the childcare sector. So this includes looking at how the role of slavery, when Black women cared for white children for no wages, contributes to our current undervaluation of childcare, and how we grossly undercompensate childcare workers and early childhood educators. We also mistakenly depend on the market to ensure supply and access to childcare. So market rates for childcare are primarily set based on families' ability to pay, not on the actual cost of meeting health and safety standards or high quality standards. So as a result, the profit margins in childcare are razor thin, and childcare workers, mostly women, are undercompensated. To remain solvent, childcare providers have to ensure that their programs are fully enrolled and fully attended to get every cent available to support their businesses. And this can disincentivize programs for serving families facing adversity, including children who need extra attention and support. And for the families who need the most financial support, those receiving subsidies, they often net the smallest reimbursement to providers. So in effect, under the current system, it can be a bad business decision for providers to serve children with the greatest needs. And then lastly, we'll speak to confusing qualifications with quality. So training in child development is important for all caregivers, absolutely. But credentials alone do not tell the full story. So we know from research that healthy brain development and resilience in young children is grounded in their attachment to loving caregivers who engage in responsive relationships. So our quality frames should reward and support these relationships as the foundation for quality. And then on top of that foundation, we can build training and credentialing to ensure that caregivers are aware of current science and can implement effective practices. So when we take all of this together, it's led us to this place where our society undervalues and underinvests in childcare and in early childhood education, leaving both families and childcare providers in a tenuous situation. And it simply is not good enough. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to share some recommendations about where we can go from here.
Thanks, Karen. So in our essay, we offer 5 recommendations and sort of big ideas for moving forward from the place from where we are now. And we start out with a recommendation around funding childcare as a public good and really marshaling significant new funding for the childcare sector, with a focus on ensuring that caregivers earn a living wage, regardless of the setting in which they care for young children, the age of those young children that they care for, or the number of children that they care for. Our sector needs to commit to ensuring that all caregivers have a living wage as the floor, and essential family supporting benefits as a starting place, not as a target for the future. We also, in that context, really talk about the need to set a consensus target for affordability and to marshal a range of policy solutions to address affordability issues for parents that also allow for choice and flexibility, recognizing that parents' choices may change over their child's young childhood, but also as the family circumstance changes, that they may need to use different options, and that parents need the ability to make those choices and afford the high quality childcare options available to them. We need to recognize and invest in the mixed delivery system. Today, we are so fortunate to have providers and advocates from center-based childcare, and family friend and neighbor care joining us today. And in part, we want to raise this issue that there's a critical need to sort of recognize the full, diverse, mixed delivery system and to invest in that entire system so that families have good, high quality options depending on what they need at different times, as their needs may change. And that really means investing in infrastructure and ongoing operational support for this mixed delivery system. And we really call out opportunities to use contract funding that may include cost reimbursement mechanisms to really stabilize the supply of a mixed delivery system. We also encourage the prioritization of families facing adversity. As Karen mentioned, the current payment payment systems and incentives in the system really discourage serving families who are most likely to benefit from high quality early learning, but need additional supports. And so the system really needs to create additional incentives and to pay more for services for children and families with special needs and those facing challenging life circumstances. And in addition to reimbursing at a higher rate for these families and children, we need to provide children, families, and providers with access to comprehensive services, mental health, disability supports that can be leveraged in the early learning program, as well as instructional supports to ensure that the environment is supportive and inclusive of all young learners. We focus in as well on sort of the need to elevate parent and provider voice and decision-making as a part of a revisioned childcare system. And this is really, I think, something that we recognize there's a lot of goodwill and interest to do, but it's really time for us to move towards specific mechanisms and system-wide accountability to ensure that parents and providers are driving decision-making and co-designing an effective childcare system. We call out a couple of specific models that might offer a starting point for really ensuring that participants and providers are co-designing and driving system decisions. We call for a commitment to quality, again, really grounding our notions of quality, the way we measure and incentivize quality around the science of human development, and namely the need for young children to have loving, supportive, and consistent relationships. And upon those relationships, we can build upskilling and credentialing of caregivers and providers in appropriate and innovative ways. And we're so excited to see some of the really interesting ways that we can deliver professional development and credentialing supports to providers in new and more appropriate ways to support them. And we can go to the last slide. This is obviously, you know, our big, you know, recommendation is really around scaling and supporting diverse home-based childcare. What we have seen throughout the pandemic is that disproportionately home-based childcare has continued to remain open and meet the needs of working parents and essential workers. And really home-based childcare offers so many of the assets that families are looking for when they need flexibility, and particularly during this difficult time of fear, disruption, and a lot of uncertainty. With appropriate supports, adequate financing, you know, distinct and specific training supports, access to comprehensive services, and appropriate infrastructure, we have evidence that home-based care can really support some important aspects of families' needs. It allows for sibling groups and children of mixed ages to be together in a single setting. It offers flexible scheduling that families need in this really uncertain employment environment. It offers care where families live, sort of hyper locally. It offers care and you know, that reflects the shared cultural and linguistic identities of families, and again is really built on this consistent caregiving relationship with children, families, and communities. And it's for that reason that we really think there's an incredible opportunity right now to make deep investments in the broad childcare sector and to really elevate the family childcare and family friend and neighbor care options as a part of a diverse and vibrant mixed delivery system. So that's the quick version of our essay. We hope you'll read it. It is also a quick read. And, you know, now with that kind of as our backdrop, we are going to, you know, bring in our panelists and really discuss some of these issues that we have raised. So I'm really excited to introduce our panelists. Joe, if you don't mind advancing the slide, maybe two. Yeah, and I'm going to take a minute to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to dive into some questions based on these topics that we've talked a little bit about today. You know, to start off, I just want to express my gratitude and thanks for this amazing group of women to join us today. Today we're joined by Sharon Nelson. Sharon is the director of Woodland Academy in Southwest Philadelphia. We're joined by Gladys Jones, who is a licensed family childcare provider in New York City and also the co-founder of ECE on the Move, an advocacy group. And we are joined by Joycelyn Ravello, who is a division lead with the Association for Supportive Childcare and works on behalf of family, friend, and neighbor providers. We're so thankful for you to join us today. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just start us out with a couple of minutes and share a little bit about yourself and your work. Each of these women really comes to this conversation wearing a few different hats: providers, advocates, parents, grandparents. So, you know, feel free to share any of those aspects of sort of your background and the work that you're doing. And I'm going to ask Sharon to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharon Nelson, and I am the director of Woodland Academy, located in Southwest Philadelphia. We are a small center, and we are a subsidized center subsidized by our main agency, which is Greater Philadelphia Health Action, which has a lot of a lot of health centers in the community. I'm also a member, a co-chair of a provider group, and I have been a co-chair for the past, I would say, 10 years, and I'm really excited about the work that we do. We bring all providers together of different types, and we discuss the issues that are affecting our work, that are impacting our work, and then we go about strategizing on how we can resolve some of our issues, how we can bring more people to the tables, and how we can actually get a seat at some of the tables in which decisions are being made without us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharon. Joyce, would you like to go next and share a little bit about yourself and the work that you're currently doing?
Good morning from Arizona. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to start with a quote that I think is pertinent to this from Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. So thank you for the opportunity. My name is Joycelyn Ravello, and I work for Association for Supportive Childcare. I am currently the division lead for the Family Support and Education Division. I started, I guess, as a family friend neighbor or an FFN myself many years ago, taking care of my nieces and of course my stepchildren and other children. And then I became part of the Keith and Kim project. And I was so fortunate that I then became the specialist for that program. I was hired and I started providing these services that Association for Supportive Childcare has. And what we do, or what I did for over a little bit over 10 years, was providing these trainings and supports for family, friends, and neighbors that were caring for children, like such as myself, and in delivering topics for brain development, ages and stages, positive guidance and discipline, amongst injury prevention as well. So I was very blessed to serve those children, those families in that need, because these families were not doing childcare basically as a choice, but as a necessity, right? So I started like that, and then I became the division lead, which I am now in the position of coaching and mentoring the staff and supporting any way I can. So that's a little bit about my background, and I'm very, very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. And Gladys, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm going to title the next essay, "We Will Not Be Endangered Species." I'm by nature an advocate for the underdog. I share that with you, Natalie, and I feel now that I am the underdog. So because of that, I had to stand up. And along with other women, basically women, we have gotten together in New York City and done something that I guess we should have done a long, long time ago: stand up for ourselves. We not ask, we demand to be at certain tables, and we have been very, I'd say, good at it. We've been at places that people act like they never heard what family child care is about, but yet family child care is one of the biggest modalities across the nation that serve in low income communities. And I would like for this to be a profession, not only a necessity, but a profession, because professions have things that give you platforms in which to grow. I wanted to be part of the infrastructure, and I am part of anything like this that allows us to speak, allows us to be to see who are the people doing the work. So ECE on the Move, it's just a whole bunch of oppressed women, I'm sorry to say, that have gotten together and we're standing up to act to make this a grounded industry, a profession that everyone respects, and it contributes to the economies. It contributes to women going out to work right now. It's a big, big thing. So That's it, basically it. I'm not a hero. I'm not anything. I'm just an oppressed woman fighting for my rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. We're so glad to have you with us today. So I have some specific questions for each of you, but I thought a place to really start is to just put COVID right on the table. And, I'd like to just start with asking each of you to just sort of, reflect on, where we are today in terms of the crisis of COVID. Gladys, you use the term endangered species, but I'd love to just sort of understand from you how your programs, how the families and children you serve and the providers that you work alongside with are faring at this moment, as a result of COVID, and obviously all these other, challenges that we were experiencing in the childcare sector prior to COVID. So maybe we can just start there, with your reflections on that, and I'll ask you, Sharon, to get us going again.
Thank you, Natalie. So as you said, the child care sector was already a fragile system with the low reimbursement rates that we were seeing. And so COVID-19, I think, just highlighted some of the inequities in the system. And so as an industry, we struggled, especially for those providers who were located in areas or communities of color, and they themselves were color. And so we had the additional pressure and also the 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 desire to help out, to open and provide care, but we were worried about what the impact would mean for ourselves and for our families. And so we were kind of debating back and forth as a group, what we should do as far as our industry. Should we support families that are essential workers, or should we remain closed and also keep our families safe? And that was very, because as child care providers, our mission really is for support and for doing what we need to do on behalf of families and behalf of our communities. And so it was a real struggle for us as providers, but also the struggle was just as a business to remain open, to remain viable, to be able to sustain ourselves without a lot of support that we were getting from the system itself. And so it really gave us a pause and a moment to really have to reposition ourselves to be successful, given those challenges that COVID had in our operations. And then also the fact that we were not necessarily treated with, I would say, the right amount of information for us to make informed decisions as a business person. We were not told about what our subsidy would look like in the months to come. And so we were kind of like playing this waiting game to try to figure out how we could survive in the middle of a COVID crisis, but also in the middle of a lack of communication and a lack of some support that we were facing as an industry. And I think it was an eye-opening thing for us. And I hope it was an eye-opening thing for our community, for them to realize that without childcare to support the needs of essential workers and moving forward, just to support the working force is a critical issue. And I think that Philadelphia, and I would say for the state of Pennsylvania, maybe other states, that childcare is in a critical state right now. And there are a lot of providers who closed. I think it's 180 providers that closed their doors because of COVID-19. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of providers who are going to be closed as we begin to see that the system is not being sustained and is not being supported in a way that really makes sense.
Gladys, do you want to go next? And I know that we've talked about some similar issues, both in terms of support and information, but how do you feel like yourself, the families you serve, other providers in New York are faring right now?
Okay. The truth of the matter is that everyone is home, more or less. We, essential, have someone that's at home taking care of children. The city is completely not open as of yet. Many of the providers did stay open, but they had to close because you can't survive off of one child too. So they had to close. Many of the parents are in fear because this is what we get from the government. Everybody's scared. So we're in limbo land. Schools are closing again. And so we are scared to, even if we could, to open because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And aside from the fact is, I see through we have well, we operate through what's called WhatsApp. So I have like 3 or 4 chats, and there's 257 people in each chat. And what we hear is people closing, selling their toys and furniture every day, closing rapidly because they cannot survive. As you know, the kids 1, 2, 3, it wasn't really good for us because what's the sense of having a wall if we don't have a daycare? We don't have anything to take care of ourselves. If we can't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to give anything to anyone. So I think that's one of the things that I've come to the conclusion that they have to take care of the people that are doing the work. If we're not able to take care of our families, not able to pay our bills, all that quality, all those other things, those beautiful daycares and whatnot, are not going to be of any good to anyone. So New York City right now I'm sure across the nation, everyone is having, everybody has a story, trials and tribulations all over the place. But the truth of the matter is that I could speak about New York City. We're in a really, really bad position at this point. And what I see is providers closing every day, and they may end up in the system. They may end up in the system, actually, if we have one left, that is.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gladys. And I want to clarify just from prior conversations that I've had with you, when you say I don't have a wall, needing a wall, this is because the way that the state used the CARES childcare funding was for facility improvements and upgrades, which many home-based providers could not, use as a part of their CARES recovery. So thank you, Gladys. Joyce, do you want to tell us a little bit about how family, friend, and neighbor providers are faring through COVID and some of the challenges that they're facing right now?
Thank you. Yes. Well, Gladys said it right. Arizona is also facing the same issues. Basically, FFNs have always been in an invisible population, right? We are unseen, undervalued, and also underfunded, of course. Many of our FFNs or family, friends, and neighbors doing care, they're doing it because they love somebody. They want to really help somebody else and not necessarily are getting paid in many cases. And I know that in Arizona and across the nation, it's about like over 60% of informal care that we are, those are our numbers, right? And it is very sad to see that we are struggling. We are struggling when we are trying to provide our participants or the families that we serve in our community with mental health, especially that. Not only our trainings, which are 15 weeks long, and a different topic every week, we do provide them with that support piece, those resources or those referrals, where to go, what to do. And with also Gladys on this, they lost their children they were caring for, and they cannot survive in one child versus 4 or 5 that were caring for before. And unfortunately, they are very scared of COVID. They are getting scared of bringing that into their families, and maybe husbands going to work, getting sick, or vice versa. It is fear all around, and yes, we are watching the news, and it is it's like a scary thing. It was broken before, now it is even a bigger mess. So what we do is just try to stay in touch. We are providing our weekly trainings via Zoom. We still provide with those classes, not in person, of course, anymore, but those 2 hours that they're connected, we are truly connected. We are truly caring for them, what they need, how they're doing. Yes, it is important to specifically talk about a topic about early childhood education, right? But most importantly, it has to start with us. If we are okay, then all of our environment, our children we serve, we're all going to be okay. So we are creating a network of people empowering this population, mostly women, right? Empowering these women to speak up and for them to be okay. For what do they need? How can we further help them in any way? Not just classes, not just childcare is they've been doing childcare in their home, and now their children and trying to be a teacher and trying to be a mom and a wife and take care of a house, and sometimes they are single moms. So it is a struggle, and we recognize that. So it is very important that we are trying to do our best for them, for our community.
Great. Yeah, I think there's so many layers of challenges really built on top of this foundation that was already pretty unstable to begin with. So I'm going to ask a couple of sort of specific questions. I also really want to encourage folks who are joining us today to share your questions. We should have time to take some questions from you, so please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. But we wanted to delve into some specific topics. And Gladys, I'd like to start with you. You know, one of the things that we have really been talking about a lot is sort of system complexity, and sort of particularly in a place like New York City, but we see this across the world, across the country as well. There are a lot of complex overlapping systems and institutions and policies, and it really is both, you know, confusing, but also time consuming to kind of keep it all together and to, you know, ensure that you are accessing resources and information to serve your program and your children, but also making sure that you continue to be compliant. So I wonder if you could just reflect a little bit on some of that kind of institutional complexity and where that leaves providers and the families they serve.
Sure. Every initial in the book we serve. DOE, IRS, DO, you go on. You know, we could go on and on. So what's happening in New York City is that pre-pandemic, we were dying anyway because our mayor, you know, his mayor of control, he took the 3-year-olds. So we couldn't survive even back then only with infants and toddlers. We just couldn't. So the 3-year-olds were being taken away, and then if you wanted to have children referrals, we would have to join what they call the early learn, which is under the Department of Education at this time. So it's a network. But what that did was strip us of our identity of self-employed people, because we still have to pay our own taxes, you know, we have to do our own thing, get our own violations, and so forth. So I think that in New York City, we have too many initials, too many people on top of us, and it doesn't allow us to flourish. It doesn't allow us to grow. But yet, again, I have to emphasize the fact that we are much needed in low-income neighborhoods. That's what people count on. You know, they're not centers in every block in New York City. They're just not. So family child care, whether it be family kith and kin, or whether it be, you know, a group or family child care, it is much needed in New York City as part of the economy. But I think bad decisions and not thinking and not having the people that do the practitioners at the table has killed us. And it's also killed the economy. Pre-pandemic, mind you. Now that the pandemic came through, that's it. We're really becoming extinct, and it's sad. We need to. I think this may be a clean slate. That's why I gravitate towards anyone that talks about it, because we need everyone on this. Everyone needs to join, and like I said, this needs to be a profession within the industry, of course. And so, if quality seems to be the focus all the time, you have to give the people the platform in which to grow, right? And it's going to be contributing to a great thing, which is a future of our young children. And the inequalities that are happening now, all the systemic measures and whatnot, need to start at the beginning. And you need to invest in the caregivers. And I hope I answered your question.
That was great. Sharon, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the issue of parent voice and the work that you've been doing in terms of kind of sharing decision making, bringing parents into making decisions. As we prepared for this webinar, really talked a lot about kind of how the environment of scarcity often pits providers and parents, in tension with one another, and would really love to hear some of your thinking and the work that you've been doing to ensure that parents are at the table and contributing, and are making decisions alongside providers and system leaders.
Yeah, so I think my growth with understanding the role of a parent in the childcare arena has really grown. I was one of those providers who would have, nice little parent meetings, and we would have raffle off a TV or raffle off different things like that. And my parents wouldn't come, and I couldn't understand like what was going on. I thought like everybody wants a TV, but I actually went to a workshop, a Head Start workshop. It was an overnight retreat with Policy Council. And I really began to understand that I had misrepresented or misunderstood the role of the family, because I no longer say parent meeting, we're having a family meeting that includes all of family types, foster parents, grandparents. So I realized that I was dictating to families what I felt they needed instead of asking them, what did they want? What did they need? How can I help them? Something just as simple, but powerful. And also, I realized that if I'm going to make that statement, if I'm going to ask parents, what is it that they need? How can I help them? I'm going to have to also be willing to walk that journey that they have told me this is what I need. I'm going to have to be willing to go outside the box and to take that journey with them. And so we flipped what it meant to be involved and engaged in our program. And we really began to talk to the parents about what was going on for them in their own lives, in the lives of their children, in the lives of the community. And that really helped us empower our families to become a part of our team, and for it to really feel like it was a family center and a family centered center. And we listened to them. I hired a social worker who became a family advocate and allowed her to work with us to change our policies and to criticize some of the things that I was doing or some of the things that we were doing that were affecting families negatively, and to be open and to be honest and to be transparent in that work. And I think it's critical. I don't think we can do what we need to do without the voices of families and providers sitting there together, balancing out our needs. If we don't have families sitting down at the table with us, then we will be creating a system that was created like for us, with just one sector and one voice that's making decisions and informing our work. So we need to have that balance of having families and having providers sitting at the table and creating that system, because we are the two major users of that system, children and providers.
Yep. Thank you, Sharon. Joyce, I'd love you to just sort of build on that a little bit. I think as we sort of increasingly talk about inclusion of family, friend, and neighbor in the childcare system, and there's a lot of, increased awareness and interest in family, friend, and neighbor providers, it's a really challenging group of families to engage in system supports, right? And I'd love you to just share sort of how you all build relationships and engage families in the Kith and Kin program, and what that outreach looks like in Arizona.
Yes, thank you. Well, what we're doing in Association for Supportive Childcare is try to continue providing those services for our families. Our outreach is based, our first and most important, I think, and most successful has always been word of mouth. Of course, with the trajectory of over 20 years with Kith and Kin, it is well known and very well accepted in our community. So we continue to partner with our schools, school districts, faith-based organizations, any family resource center, or anywhere that they would partner with us, so we can go and continue to do the work we do. Outreach is basically, well, post-COVID, right? Everything's virtual now. So we create flyers, we send them to our parent liaisons, we are in contact with them, we are trying to establish new and also continue to nurture those relationships that we already have with them and great partnerships we have had. But the outreach of how we bring the other participants into our classes is mainly word of mouth, is mainly using our social medias, our Facebook accounts, Instagram, our agencies, media as well, so we can reach out as many families as possible. Right after COVID hit, we were in the middle of doing our in-person classes, and then boom, this hits. Now what can we do? So in a matter of days, we had to basically reinvent ourselves and learn this virtual world of COVID. Zoom and all these things that were foreign to most of us, right? We were like, okay, now we have to learn something different, and we dove right into doing our virtual classes, and also Facebook Live videos. Just try to keep our community engaged, keep our community connected and learning. And hey, we were in person, but hey, we can continue to see each other through Zoom. And it was great to graduate our classes and see all the little faces in all of these little squares with the diplomas, and we're clapping. And it was such a memorable time, at least for me, because this didn't stop us. I think our attitude was, yeah, this is just a bump in the road, but this is not going to stop us from you getting your certificate and your children looking at you and being inspired how you were able to just transition and continue. Although this was, unprecedented, we were not expecting it. Their children are going to see their mom or their caregiver being the leader of their home and saying, if I'm taking these classes online, so can you. And I'm here to help you. And we're a community, and that's what we're here for. So this has been our post-COVID experience so far.
Great. So there are a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to try to combine a few questions and ask all three of you, whoever wants to respond to this. But, each of you is so able to sort of powerfully describe what the children and families you serve need, and what you as a provider and the community of providers need. And sort of, how do we move that from a question here to really not just being kind of a seat at the table, but being really a stakeholder in the decision making at the places of decision making where we know this needs to happen. And so, I'd love to just ask, what do you sort of see as those next steps to get us to that place? Or how do we move from here to the next step? From your perspective. And again, whoever would like to take that question, or if a couple of you want to answer it, that would be great. Gladys, go ahead.
I think laws need to be put in place that, I hear you guys saying it's a public good and so forth, but it has to be put into law that if ever we come across anything like this, God forbid we don't, that child care should not be where we at right now. It should be part like electricity, like a utility. You don't question that because it's there. So that's what we need to have. That's where we need to be. So we will not be in these type of panels speaking of survival or how are we going to just be here tomorrow, but that we are here maybe talking about other things of how we're going to improve our industries in all modalities, with quality care, professional development, so forth. But right now, what we're talking about is people being able to survive, eat, and live. So I think the law has to be changed, and the government needs to start speaking. Child care is not a bad word, type of thing. because I don't hear it. I don't hear it even when I listen to Schumer. He talked about Thrive. He talked about these other things. He talked about public school education, but he doesn't talk about before. There's a beginning, and we're the beginning.
Mhm.
So change the law. The laws need to be changed.
Yep. Sharon, do you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I think as a society, we have really shifted, unfortunately, the seats of power and our understanding of power. And I think we need to reclaim that. Power is not in your elected official. Power is in the people who elected that official. And so what we need to do is hold those officials accountable. And it doesn't matter whether we have a Republican as a president, whether or not we have a Democrat as a president, or whether what seats they hold in office. What should matter is that when we are faced with an issue of justice and injustice, that we stand on the side of justice and that we make our voices known and that we speak to our legislators and let them know that, no, this is not acceptable. This is what we need to do as a community. I think we have to take back the power and realize that our voices are powerful and we need to use them to speak up and to speak out and to stand for those who can't speak for themselves.
Thank you, Sharon and Gladys. I think there's a lot to take away from that. Joyce, did you want to jump in and add anything?
Just one last thing. Let's pretend we're invisible. Stop pretending we're invisible. We are here. We need to be seen. We need to do something about it. This is as important. Gladys said it perfectly. Like an electricity bill. I love that. Yes, we have to start somewhere. I believe we can start by recognizing and acknowledging we are here. FFN is real. And we need to support our families who support our children. And our children are the foundation of our society. And the first 5 years, they're critical, and they must know this. They must know how important it is to invest in those children who will hold our society one day. And the more we invest in them, the greater the return, right? So we have to let them know we are here, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere. So might as well have them see us and what we do and why is this so important. And now that we have even more needs than before, then let's try to tackle one at a time. But I guess just starting with letting everybody know how this is a reality. This is a reality for a lot of families that don't have the needs. And the more we are able to provide them with whatever they might need, financial, protective gear, education, networks, support, mental health, everything, families are going to be okay. And if families are going to be okay, I have faith in society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, it feels like we've just started this conversation, but we don't have much time left. So what I'm going to ask, again, I'm going to try to, combine a few different ideas, but I'm going to ask you each just to leave us with some closing thoughts. We have talked about lots of different issues and priorities. We've talked about compensation and financing and the legal infrastructure that supports our field and parent voice, provider voice. But, there are philanthropists and government and community members on the call today. So I want you to leave us with the thought of kind of, where do we start? What do we do next? Who needs to do what? Just one thought. I know that you probably have 10 or 15 as I do, but leave us with a call to action on what we do when we get off of this call today. Gladys, I'd love to start with you. What's your final thought for us today?
Here we are. And like Adolphin said, we're not going anywhere. And you're feeling the effects. Everyone is feeling the effects. The world is feeling it. So do you want this to be part of our world? Child care is essential in every aspect. And if we don't have child care, the world is not coming back.
Thank you, Gladys. Sharon?
Oh my goodness. I don't really have one thought, Natty, to be honest with you. I'm really hopeful that we take this conversation beyond just a conversation. I think that's what I would say. Let's take this beyond the conversation and let's do some action and really organize ourselves as a community. Whether you are in Arizona or whether you're in New York or whether you're in Philadelphia, childcare looks the same and it affects us the same way. And so we need to really raise our voices, link yourself up with somebody else, get in touch with your families, reach out to them, have them advocate with you, empower your teachers, empower your students to reach out to their legislators, to reach out to each other, and let's just build a stronger community, community.
Thank you, Sharon. Joyce, what words would you like to leave us with today? Or call to action. What should we all be doing next?
Thank you. Yes, I agree, and I echo both ladies, Sharon and Gladys. I think we have to continue to do something. Thank you for this platform. I think this should be just the beginning of maybe a movement, maybe of a little voice that can resonate louder. And I think by having these meetings, we can continue to spread the word. Maybe they do not know we're here. I hope that's why they haven't done anything, right? So let's continue to our voices to be heard. And I guess starting with our communities, providing them or allocating some funds to provide them the essentials. They're here, they want to do this job out of love, not precisely per pay. So if they're doing this out of love and they don't want to get sick, let's provide them what they need. Essentials, cleaning supplies, masks, I don't know, a way for them to continue to have the least concerns as possible and continue to do what they're doing. So allocate some funds, continue to speak up, speak louder, get together, build a strong network and continue to be there. I guess that's my thought.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to each of you just for your incredible leadership, for the amazing work that you do every day, and for sharing that with us today. I'm truly grateful. I do want to add a very concrete action step for the group, which is that our Congress has not passed a relief bill that would get funding and support to the families and providers, the providers that are on this call today and the families that they serve, and the thousands of other families and providers that are in dire need, that are in the survival game that Gladys described. And so we all have work to do to ensure our elected officials get immediate relief to families. So maybe that can be your concrete takeaway from today. I also really ask you to continue to be engaged with us at Homegrown. We will have a webinar next week where we share data that we've collected from both FFN providers and family childcare providers through our emergency relief work, and hope that you will continue to engage with us. I know there were a couple of questions that we didn't get to today, but we will try to get to you offline and share that with you. But thank you so much. Thank you, Gladys and Joyce and Sharon, for sharing your experiences with us today. And thank you, Joe, for creating this space for this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Natalie and Karen, and thank you, Gladys and Joyce and Sharon, for what a really exciting and wonderful conversation. I love what I was also seeing in the chat, stories from Minnesota and California and elsewhere, people who are doing this work, who are in the trenches, so to speak, every day, taking care of young children and their families. And so thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for sharing your insights. Just a final word from me. We have two other upcoming events this month that I'd like to tell you about. Join us on October 13th for a conversation with the inaugural recipients of our first ever fellowship supporting journalists engaged in complex and long form reporting around the pressing issues facing families with young children. And then we're also hosting an interactive learning and strategy session to explore the pandemic-formed future for young children and to help you make sense of that future and the rebuilding to come. Both of those events can be found at capitasocial.org/events. So thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to be with us this afternoon, this morning. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you, and bye-bye.